something about this story felt like you could capture it in a movie in a way that would even take it one step beyond the book. So from the first time I started to read it, I could feel a sort of a tingle of thinking, this really could be a piece of cinema. It could be something which would really grab an audience in almost an old-fashioned way, where the story could be told through pictures and the characters would just come off the page and absolutely grab you. She completely overwhelmed us. She was so much fun. She was such an American teenager. And at the end of it, Peter and I looked at each other and thought, she was incredibly special. But I don't think at that moment thought, and she's obviously great. But then Scarlett came in to read for us. And all of a sudden, this brash American teenager had understood what this part was. When we first met her, she hadn't read the script yet. We just had a meeting. She came in and she had just understood it in a way which is very hard to describe. She understood just how powerful the stakes were, how much she was a commodity who was being bought or sold, and how much she was the centre somehow of this painter's imagination, and how she'd inspired something so special. It was a completely thrilling filmmaking moment. Everybody just completely unable to believe that somehow she'd become the painting. And it's not just that she looks the right way, or that she has the turban and the colours are right and the face has that similarity. It is something about what that painting is, that when you look at it you think, who is this girl and what is this moment that she's experiencing that gives her that extraordinary look, and what is the relationship between the painter and the girl that makes it so challenging. What we knew we were going to need was somebody who could carry that enigmatic quality, also carry a sense of being a great artist, but then have a warmth that made you believe the relationship. And I think we'd all seen Colin Firth do his Darcy, do his incredibly enigmatic, cold character. And we'd seen the funny side of him in the comedies that he did. I think actually, strangely, it was a play that we saw him in several years ago at the Donmar Warehouse, where we saw him, he was actually playing an American. And we saw a completely different side of him. This was just when we'd actually got the rights to the book. And it said from that very moment to us that there was a side of Colin that we hadn't seen. And I think what he brings is that warmth. We all know he can do the enigmatic side, but when that warmth suddenly breaks through, you absolutely melt. And you can see just what a devastating effect he has on this girl when she actually connects with him in such a way that she pleases him as a painter. I'd worked with Peter through his work as an editor, through directing documentaries for us, seeing his first television dramas, some of which were incredibly powerful. And so I felt like I'd sort of grown up with him as a filmmaker. And when I first gave the screenplay to him, his response to it was actually quite shocking to me, because I didn't realise this was an area of the world that he was fascinated by. And he got the story so immediately. I actually sent him off to my wife, who's the screenwriter, because I thought, well, if he can convince her the way he's just convinced me, then we might have to do this. I think one of the things that comes through from the novel is that these people lived in unheated houses with deeply inadequate clothing, and that life was pretty tough. I love some of the sequences in the novel where she'll go up to the studio to be away from everything else that is going on in the house, even though it's so cold in there she can barely move. So cold was something that really came through from the novel. We didn't quite expect that when we got into the heart of the winter when we were shooting that we'd be dealing with 6 inches of ice on the canals and having divers in dry suits smashing the ice. At one point, even having to get bulldozers into the canal to smash the ice so we could clear it and get on with it. So it was pretty intense. We set out to try and make sure that the world of the studio was magical. That's the place where those great Vermeer paintings were created, so many of them created in that strange little corner of a room that we had to recreate. Up there, that's Griet and Vermeer's world, and it is really special. Downstairs, outside, needs to be a much dirtier, chaotic world, children, animals, chaos, danger. And so the contrast between the two worlds had to be writ large. Eduardo Serra is a cinematographer that I'd tried to work with before. Hadn't worked out until that stage. But what he manages to bring is a sort of naturalism to the lighting. You never even think about this world being lit. It just looks real, and yet a much more beautiful reality than most of us will experience.